Joining us now, I got to get his response to this. Everyone knows former Congressman Mark Meadows. He was the White House Chief of Staff for President Trump. It's good to see you, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us, sir, Congressman. And I have to get your reaction to this. I mean, it's really the state media reporter who's saying that, under Trump, he was so mean to our allies, which, just to kind of preface it, I always sort of thought that it was kind of us that we were sort of being mistreated because not everyone was they weren't fulfilling their NATO obligations.
The leftist media is all about. They say, well, gosh, we need to have this peaceful coexistence with our European allies. And I can tell you, it was President Donald Trump who said, you're not paying your fair share. You cannot rely on the American taxpayer. I just talked to him this week about this very subject. He says, it's amazing how they were never asked to actually pony up and pay their fair share until President Trump came to the Oval. And to say that there's so many scars, I can tell you what President Trump had. He had the respect of every world leader. And candidly, when it was America first, I was with him. We traveled abroad. We were there together. And I can tell you that each and every time they understood that his first priority was the American people. But guess what? Their first priority were the people that they represented. It's what it should be, but yet at the same time, somehow we have this America last policy with Joe Biden over there making, once again, an apology tour. And I think the American people have had enough. I know you and I have.
Yes, definitely. We have had enough. We're talking with Mark Meadows, who was the chief of staff under President Trump. I know that Biden's going to be meeting with Putin on June 16th, and I'm wondering if he's just going to have if he's just going there to have Putin thank him in person for helping to empower them and really undermining NATO by undercutting Ukraine and then helping to destabilize the relationship with Germany, because ultimately that's what this is about, what Yamiche Alcindor was talking about here. It was Angela Merkel who did not want to meet the expectations of a NATO member country and expected that the United States taxpayer was going to pay the cost of Germany's defense, which that shouldn't be expected by anyone. And Trump was the only one that actually squared up to her and then squared up to Putin, which I think really shocked Moscow. I feel like, Mark, that they are anticipating a very easygoing time with Biden when they meet on the 16th.
Well, sadly, I think that's what they'll get. We've already seen the interaction between the Biden administration and the Chinese. I can tell you, I was in the Oval Office when President Trump had conversations with some of the very leaders that you're talking about. And to say that it was a firm conversation would be an understatement. He said, let's take Germany, for example. They have this unbelievable economy, and yet they're not contributing what they've obligated themselves to. It was not like we were actually raising the ante. It was just saying, just do what you said you would do. And when he pointed it out, it was like all of the leftist, diplomatic, foggy bottom career bureaucrats, they went crazy. How dare you ask a foreign country to actually fulfill their obligation? And yet the president was very consistent with that. And you're right. You see it. Maybe it's just going over to say thank you. You killed the Keystone Pipeline, Joe Biden, and yet you gave Russia a pass on their pipeline to Germany. It's a sad commentary.
Yeah. And while they also talk about environmentalism, which I would just think to have that nice, clean gas from the United States as opposed to dirty Russian gas, and not just because they're communists, but because, they have about as many environmental protections as China does, I understand. So for all of the discussion about in the name of the environment, that also seems to be fake.
Well, it is. Listen, Joe Biden, even by his own Democrat colleagues, have time and time again suggested that Joe Biden is not the best negotiator and diplomatic advocate for Americans' interests. And we're seeing that already as we go over, just some of the very brief comments in preparation for this trip was very troubling to so many. And yeah, they want to say it's going to be this kumbaya tour, but I can tell you who will ultimately pay the price? The American taxpayer. And it's not the government's money. It's your money, my money, everybody that pays in. And Washington, D.C. needs to understand that. And when they start just saying, well, we're going to forgive this or we're going to give you some additional money, it's not the government's money. It's ours.
Exactly. Speaking of that, we're talking with Mark Meadows, former congressman from North Carolina, also chief of staff for President Trump. You mentioned the tax money, the U.S. taxpayer. A couple of very interesting things happened in the span of the last couple of weeks, as you know. First off, you have Joe Biden asking for $6 trillion of new spending. And it was very interesting. I think it was the American Families Plan. That was one of the $2-something trillion plans in which they discussed. He laid out his plans to beef up the IRS because they knew that their new taxes, that wasn't alone going to meet the revenue demand. So they're going to have to shape people down some other way. So they're going to get very aggressive in using the IRS to go after people. And I told folks, if you thought that the IRS was bad under the Tea Party, you ain't seen nothing yet. While this happens, then you have this story from ProPublica that came out this week. And it lists the private tax information of wealthy individuals, people like Elon Musk and even Jeff Bezos. And people can have whatever opinions they want to of Bezos and, everybody else. But the way I understand it is that that's a felony to leak that information. They didn't certainly get it from anybody's accountant. That had to be from the IRS. ProPublica runs it, not as a story about how the government is trying to sway public opinion by leaking government, private information, but they run it as a way to shame people. Very convenient timing, right when Joe Biden used a bunch of Marxist language to talk about the upcoming tax hikes that are going to hit America. Your thoughts on this, and do you think that there's going to be any effort to, I know that so far some investigations have been called for, and I think one was started to figure out what happened here, but what is your thought on this?
Well, listen, when you look at leaking taxpayer information, this is not the first time it's happened. It happened to President Trump. What we also know is I happened to be sitting when I was a member of Congress when Lois Lerner came in and raised her right hand. And what I can tell you is that it's a consistent theme that the Democrats want to use the power of the federal government to not only, and it was your words, it's a shakedown of sorts, and it's also a shaming. And when we see that, isn't it ironic? They want to defund the police, but they want to fund a whole lot of IRS agents to come in and police your financial contributions and your tax deductions. I mean, how can you put the two of those together and have it come out of the same person's mouth? I'm very troubled by it. This is really about weaponizing some of the bureaucrats that are there. And when you look at taxes, Joe Biden wants to say, well, we're going to only tax the rich. I can tell you that when you look at his budget, it's going to tax everybody. We will see everything going up. And even with his $6 trillion plan, we're already seeing the inflationary effects. Yeah. And who does it affect? It doesn't affect the wealthy. They can go to the supermarket and buy whatever they want. It affects those that are having a hard time living paycheck to paycheck.
And we've seen that with the cost of goods, the cost of lumber. There are jokes about, I keep seeing all different photos. Everybody I know posts something on social media where they're like, oh, went to Home Depot, got a couple of boards here, cost me about $1,000.
Yeah.
But it's not actually,
incredible.
it's about incredible. A 600% increase, I think, in the price of lumber. And now we're seeing housing stall, the construction of new homes as a result of this. So this is all, as you said, it's all related to what's already passed, what's already been implemented under this administration, and people anticipating what's to come. You have spoken out quite a bit, looking domestically, kind of domestically, because it involves China, about Dr. Anthony Fauci, who really got to love that podium and love the microphone and I loved the press conferences that President Trump had. And I remember, it's like one of those situations when you're when one hot summer day, you're super hot and you're cursing the heat. And then when you're in, it's below zero winter and you're freezing to death, you're like, why did I ever complain about the heat? I remember at one point saying it's another press conference, another coronavirus press conference. Now, I wish that I never would have ever been tired of them because there was so much transparency. People were bored with it. People were bored with officials coming out and answering every question. Well, now we have some really serious questions. There's no coronavirus task force. We have a border czar that won't even talk about the border. We don't get any questions about the lab leak theory, how much taxpayer dollars were involved. Is there something else that we also funded that Fauci's aware of? And then we have all of these, like today NBC reported about the issue of heart inflammation, a suspicion of it as it relates to the vaccine for young men under the age of 30. A lot of questions, and Fauci seems to only be talking about how you can't attack him or disagree with him because he's science, and yet no one answers any any of this. You think he should be fired, and what do you think about this? We need to have another task force presser.
Listen, when we talk about transparency, you and I both know that we had briefing after briefing after briefing, and yet many on the left would say, "Oh well, the president's not telling the truth." What we're finding is that it was Dr. Fauci that had a loose association with the truth, not only based on the emails, but if he enjoyed the truth as much as he had enjoyed the limelight, we would have been in a much better place. And yet what we do see each and every day is that it is time for accountability. And whether it's on the border or whether it is literally looking at these emails and the investigation into the root causes of where COVID-19 came from, it was an inconsistent message that continued to come out from Dr. Fauci, and yet they seem to be coming to his defense. I can tell you that they're circling the wagons as they circle back to get you answers. I mean, it's just one of those things, Dana, that we have got to make sure that when we talk about science, Dr. Fauci says, well, they're attacking science. You're right. We are attacking political science. It's the political science, not the real science, that we're actually going after. It's his political views that continue to come out and continue to this day to not be transparent.
Yeah, absolutely. Transparency. And when there isn't transparency, that's when people start kind of filling in those blanks for themselves. And you have this issue of accusations of misinformation, etc. Mark Meadows, it was a real pleasure having you. We'd love to have you on again. We'd love to talk to you anytime. Very good to see you, and thank you for all you do. Have a great weekend.
It's good to see you. Great to be with you. Thanks.
Thank you.